Okay, so as I was saying, this is a speech about loneliness when you become older. And it's quite easy, nothing specific. I'm just going to quote Albert Einstein at the beginning. You know who he is, and Albert Einstein. And then further into the speech, there's the name of two British associations. One is called Women's Institute, and the other one is called Contact the Elderly. And I also mentioned the Silver Line Helpline. Apart from that, it's all pretty easy. It was just so you know, it was written for like a mock conference. So the beginning is like what we usually have in a conference. Anyway, if you're all ready, I'm going to start now. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chair, for inviting me to participate to today's conference. I am very glad I can open the second part of this very interesting event. Albert Einstein once said, "I live in that solitude which is painful in youth, but delicious in the years of maturity." I have to say that this quote makes me want to age quickly and get to that part of life when all the troubles are gone. I can imagine myself retired, resting and relaxing in a lovely house with just some time to dedicate to myself and to no one else. I consider it to be a great opportunity to rediscover us and explore our most intimate aspects. Maybe you share the same opinion, but I have to say that sadly a considerable amount of elderly people do not agree, either with me or with Einstein. In fact, they actually find loneliness the most difficult feature of maturity to cope with. Loneliness among elderly people can be due to two main reasons. First of all, the fact that they do not work anymore, so they're not employed now. And also, most importantly, the loss of a partner or friends and the wider distance between them and the rest of their families. But let's see these two aspects in more detail. Retirement can be a goal for many, but a curse for others. In fact, leaving the workplace often means the loss of one's social role. This then leads to a feeling of uselessness and frustration that increases the will of elderly people to distance themselves from society. It is a typical situation in which they could simply ask for help. They could call friends or relatives to talk about how they feel, and also get involved in local community activities. However, their pride or the fact that they don't want to be a burden prevents them from doing so. Another factor, as we were saying, that causes loneliness is the loss of their parents and partners and friends, who represent comfort and familiarity. Moreover, the distance between them and their sons and daughters, who by now are adults and they probably have a spouse and children, usually gets wider during maturity. These two factors create a sense of confusion and disorientation, and this happens in a world that keeps changing and is extremely different from the one they grew up in. The worst consequence of loneliness and living alone is developing habits that are bad for health. For example, eating poorly or having less motivation to be physically active. In addition to this, being alone can also affect mental health, as you can all imagine, and it causes people to feel low and depressed. Some studies have also shown that social isolation can cause damage to the immune system, system, and this leads to a condition called chronic inflammation, which implies muscle loss and therefore difficulty to move. However, though, there are many things that we, our families, and the elderly people themselves can do to prevent loneliness and to stop all the consequences. For example, elderly people could join activities in the local area, such as book clubs, bridge or bingo, singing groups or walking groups, as well as quiz night or faith groups. If we think about the UK, for example, there are some associations, such as the Women's Institute and Contact the Elderly, that are actually specialized in involving elderly people in local activities. Or a simple phone call to the Silverline Helpline is sometimes enough to know what is going on in the neighborhood. Apart from this, they could invite friends and family over for tea or dinner, or if sometimes seeing each other in person is not always possible, a chat over the phone can be enough to keep the loneliness away. However, families have an important role as well. They should try to spend some more time with the older relatives, and they have to make them feel appreciated and not forgotten. They should call them on the phone, visit them, or also have them over more often. Despite all this, we do not have to forget that even if loneliness is a terrible condition for many people, there are others who actually enjoy their own company. As I said at the beginning, Einstein himself used to find solitude delicious in the years of maturity. In Italy, recently a study has been carried out comparing the opinions on loneliness of elderly people living in nursing homes or living at home. The research showed that some elderly men and women actually prefer to spend time by themselves. The reason was often that they couldn't find anyone who shares the same interests. As we say in Italy, in fact, it is better to be alone than in bad company. Others also stated that loneliness didn't bother them as long as they had something to do, and they always managed to find a chore or a hobby. A few people argued that they had been solitary their entire life, so being alone during maturity wasn't much different than how they had spent the rest of their life. To conclude, as we can see, there are different approaches to loneliness. In my personal opinion, it isn't always a bad thing to be by ourselves. I think it gives us the chance to do those things that we like and follow those passions we can't share with anybody else. Also, it can be quite peaceful and a great opportunity to meditate on ourselves and on our lives. I do, however, understand that it can be a difficult situation for a lot of people, especially during maturity. I therefore think that we all should try to make the lives of our relatives that are in such a situation easier, and that we should make them feel appreciated and not as a burden for the rest of the family. So I'd like to conclude my speech inviting you all to call your grandparents or your parents this afternoon and dedicate them a little bit of your time. Thank you very much for the attention.